What's up, guys? So I just got done watching Wonder Woman 1984, and I don't do many of these videos. This will be like a rambling kind of video with no editing. I'm just going to be talking through this and my kind of thoughts and feelings on Wonder Woman 1984. I'm going to start with no spoilers towards the movie at all. I might be talking about a couple spoilers from the first film, so if you've not seen the first film, go watch that, and potentially 1984 if you are interested. But I will warn you when I do get into spoilers for this particular movie. So I'll warn you, but first off, we'll just get into the general stuff here. I really enjoyed the first Wonder Woman film. I went in with no expectations at all. I try my best not to get spoiled or kind of tainted or tarnished by trailers. I just want to go into a film completely blind and enjoy it for what it is, or don't enjoy it for what it is. I went in with no expectations. I had my reservations about Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, but she blew me away. I think she did a great performance, and she proved a lot of people wrong. So I came out of Wonder Woman really enjoying the film. It wasn't a masterpiece, it wasn't perfection, but it was a damn good time, and I had a lot of fun with it. Some of the action scenes were great. The chemistry between Gal Gadot and Chris Pine were spot on. Really enjoyed their relationship on screen together. I think Patty Jenkins had a really good turn as the director. And so when I heard that there was a second movie being commissioned and it being set in 1984, I was really, really curious as to see what would happen. I was in straight away. I was like, cool, let's watch the second movie. And whereas the first movie had no expectations, so like really pleasantly surprised me, coming into a sequel after being in kind of enjoying a film, there is always going to be that level of expectancy that comes in. That's inevitable. You've now got an audience, you've now won a fan over, and now they expect it to be more of the same or better. Wonder Woman 1984 is awful. I say that as someone that's a big fan of the first film. I sit here somewhat in disbelief of how bad this movie actually is. All the things that worked in the first movie have just been thrown aside and scrapped, and they just are not present in this film at all. And for a movie that is nearly reaching 2.5 hours in length, I am absolutely baffled at the lack of anything meaningful in this movie. It is 2.5 hours of hot air and nothing else. There is a pretty cool and nice message wrapped up in the center of it that I agree with, but even that's not fully explored. And this movie is a waste of time. So if you're on the fence whether to watch Wonder Woman 1984 or not, I recommend that you go and use that 2.5 hours for something more productive. Because this movie, this ain't it, Chief. Like, it really, really is a very, very poor effort. Which is even more surprising because they got the trio back again. They got Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, Patty Jenkins as a director, and Chris Pine makes a return in 1984, which I was really curious about because obviously his character met his demise at the end of the first Wonder Woman movie. So I didn't have any idea. It's like 70 years afterwards. Where does he come from? Is it a distant relative of his that's kind of like him? Is it like a multiverse? Like, there's a bunch of stuff going on in my head about what this could possibly come up as, and even the way that it happens is disappointing. But again, I'm not going to spoil just yet. The story, pacing, action, and just general direction of this movie are all over the place. You're going to hear me say inconsistent, all over the place, illogical, or words to that effect many times, because this movie is just one dumpster fire of what the fuck. There are so many times that a character makes a decision or does something that just doesn't make any sense at all. It's like those classic horror movies where the victim just does something dense as fuck and gets themselves killed, and you're almost like, I'm glad you got killed, you are stupid. That's kind of how it feels like in this movie. It's hard to give a shit about characters when they do things that just don't make any sense whatsoever. It's hard to feel invested. It's hard to connect with these characters. It's hard to feel like you want them to succeed. Even the superpowers, though, obviously at the center of a Wonder Woman movie are going to be superpowers. These are all over the place. They change in severity. Their ability levels just go up and down as the movie sees fit. Again, I'm not going to spoil, but we will get into this a little bit later on. There's no surprises. There's nothing interesting. There's nothing intriguing. You've seen this film before millions of times in the past in different packages that for the most part were done better. A movie doesn't have to have twists and turns. It doesn't have to have this big WTF moment where, you know, the curtain is pulled back and you find out, like in the first movie, that it's all been a setup. This film is so predictable in all the worst possible ways. There is nothing in this movie that is going to catch you off guard or is going to surprise you or shock you. You're going to know exactly what happens. I was also excited because you had some other stars joining the fray. You had Pedro Pascal. I think this guy is an excellent actor. I really like his work in so many other things. You give him good material, you give him a good director, as Patty Jenkins proved she was in the first movie, and he will churn out good performances. He's trying his best, but I just don't think there's enough for him to work with. Maxwell Lord is he's just nothing. He's mediocre. He's meh as a villain. He doesn't really do much. There isn't much to hate about him or like about him. He's pulled off as almost this sympathetic villain that you don't really feel anything towards. And that's far from ideal in a movie like this. You have to have a baddie. You have to have somebody that people want to get behind and rally behind. I suppose what the movie is trying to tell you is that, like, human nature itself is the ultimate baddie, or goodie as it may be, but it's just done in such a haphazard, slap you over the back of the head approach that it just doesn't hit the mark at all. Kirsten Wiig is playing Kirsten Wiig in another Kirsten Wiig role where she's awkward and nerdy and socially inept. We've seen this before many times. She's good at the role, so I guess she'll keep getting hired to do it. There is a different take later on in the film when she goes into full-on psycho furry mode. We'll get back onto that as well. Yeah, that was an interesting twist. That was an interesting turn. I'll be honest about that one. She does okay. I mean, it's not bad. It's not good. It's just down the middle. The biggest issue for me, though, about Wonder Woman, and this is where I will start to get into spoilers, so you've been warned from here on out, is going to be heavy, game-breaking, movie-breaking spoilers. The biggest issue with Wonder Woman 1984 for me is the wasted potential. You had this first film that captured so much of an audience, myself included. You had these really interesting characters coming to the fray. You had these really interesting ideas with Diana losing her powers and becoming more human, losing her immortality. Now she's able to get hurt and injured, losing her strength, losing her speed, losing so much. And there, it was dangling, like there was this really alluring, interesting narrative that I thought was going to be built up about how she would learn humility through this. She'd understand more about the plight of just normal people like Barbara, somebody that's been trodden over and walked over her whole life, that's as timid as a mouse, and now that she is losing her immortality and she is facing those things herself, what impact will that have on Diana, and what will that teach her about the future? Fuck all, because it's never explored. It's never even delved into. There's like 3 minutes and then, well, see you later, bye, I'm back to being fine again. It just absolutely blew my mind at how much wasted potential this film had. And for a movie that clocks in at nearly 2.5 hours, as I've already touched on, you'd have thought there'd be more than enough time to dedicate a good hour towards that plight, to really make that crescendo of the ending when she has to say goodbye again to Steve, that little bit more of a gut punch, that she has been on both sides of the equation. She has both been the vulnerable one and she has been like the godlike one. And the differences that will make this duality and dichotomy in her head of what she needs to accomplish, and just becoming a better, more rounded character as a result of it. But because it's never explored, it's just whatever. It's just a real shame. They should have explored this more. And we had a flashback at the start of the film about truth and how about you need to earn what you effectively want in life. You can't just take shortcuts. You can't cheat. You have to get there through your own merit and hard work. And I really like that as a concept. I really like that idea. I think the lesson that's trying to be pushed here is a good one. But ironically, the movie takes shortcuts all over the fucking place. It cuts corners. It doesn't do its due diligence, and so it just comes across as a hypocritical pile of dog shit at the end of it. There were so many golden opportunities here to cash in, and Wonder Woman 1984 never did it. And even within the context of her losing her powers, by the way, and again, here's the inconsistencies. She doesn't even fully lose them. She's still superhuman. She's still capable of pushing armored vehicles around like they're made of paper, running faster than them, showing super strength and durability. Even when she gets injured, it's like she just gets knocked back slightly from a bullet. Most people are getting knocked on their ass and unconscious or just straight up dead. So even within the context of her losing her abilities, this is why I go back to what I said before about, like, it's just all over the place. Sometimes she can throw tanks around, and sometimes, you know, getting thrown on the ground once, you know, she's basically stuck there. She looks exhausted. It's so strange to me. There's so much stupid shit in this movie as well, which I'm going to go through here. And this is like a checklist of stupidity. Some of this I jotted down because I knew I was going to take a break halfway through because I was bored shitless. And some of this will just be off the top of my head. So first off, right at the beginning of the film, and this really made me worried about how bad this movie was going to be, the first action scene is just so bad. It's so basic. It uses the same shots of her lassoing people. It just seems so lazy. And the fights themselves are just garbage. But it shows her wearing her outfit, donning it like a badass, just publicly stomping assholes into the ground, right? It makes an effort to show that she uses her tiara to, like, basically break the cameras. And the idea being, like, no one will ever know I was here. And later on, of course, in the Justice League, she tells Batman that for basically a century she's been hiding low and she's been doing nothing. She's not been helping people. She's just been keeping to herself. So this movie's a slap in the face to that then. This just kills the continuity, kills the consistency. It contradicts, like, movies further down the line in the timeline. Like 30 years later, she's telling Batman, I kept under the radar, I never did anything. But here she is publicly in a mall in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people, beating the shit out of baddies with guns. Even if the cameras all got destroyed, there are thousands of eyewitness accounts. You don't think that's going to go in the newspaper? You don't think that's going to make headlines on the news of a woman that saved, like, picking people up by their fucking ankles, lassoing around the place like a jungle gym, like crushing guns with her bare hands? You don't think any of this is being reported on? That Batman can easily find out later on down the line? Because remember the scenes as well where he's going full detective mode and he can barely find out who she is. He has to go back to some, like, really old obscure pictures of her in World War One. So it's just blatantly obvious things to me that I picked up on straight away. And this got through not only the script writing stage, this got through to the final movie itself. And it's not like that movie was made decades ago. That was made in recent memory. Like, that's easy to find out. So right off the bat, I'm sat there and I'm thinking, this is going to be a dumpster fire. And it just got worse and worse. Maxwell's wish is to be the Stone himself. This is like the center point of the whole villain of the movie. It's this stone, and it's like the nature of humankind. So he says to the Stone, I want to be you, basically. I want to be the Stone. Isn't this effectively like the classic make-a-wish for infinite wishes from a genie that most people assume that, like, can't be done because then everyone would just wish for, like, multiple wishes? And that's one thing, right? But you have to also consider that later on they find out that this is the same stone that has basically crushed previous civilizations, like the Mayans, like the Romans. You're telling me that in all the people that have possessed this stone, not one of them wished for infinite wishes? Isn't this the first thing that someone would ask for? Isn't this the most obvious, like, 3 IQ thing you'd ask for? Is like, my wish is to have unlimited wishes. Checkmate, scrub. Like, no one has ever wished for this before in the past until Maxwell does. Are you fucking serious? That is absolutely ridiculous. Illogical. Doesn't make sense. Diana's wish is to get Steve back. This one, like, fair enough. You know, she's missed him for decades. It does a pretty good job of showing that she purposely stays away from society and she keeps to herself and she keeps a low profile. And although she's a beautiful woman with a lot of confidence and power and everything else, she does her absolute best to stay to herself because she doesn't want to love again. She loves Steve's character, and that's the way it is. And I found that sweet. I thought that was nice, and I thought it was done pretty well. But here's the problem with it. You wish him back on a whim, like, just, oh, I wish he was here. And then he comes back. And there's a few issues with this. The first one is he appears into somebody else's body randomly that just also happens to be in Washington, D.C. So out of all the places that he could have appeared, he just appears in Washington, D.C. But even within that context, this is a bit off. What happened to the guy that he took over, that he's now basically wearing like a puppet? What happened to that guy? Where did he go? Did he just die? Is this dude just like in purgatory or some shit? Kind of fucked up, isn't it? So this guy that you've just took the body over now just doesn't exist anymore. He's just gone. He's just out of there. Seems a bit unreasonable. You never find out. At the end, he makes a return and Gal Gadot finds him, which is weird in itself. Washington, D.C., I checked this, in 1984 had a population of 3 million people, and she just happens to stumble into him at the end, and I guess the movie's trying to show you, oh, he's alright, don't worry about it. Wonder Woman's not evil after all. But what's the chances, right? Like, there's so many coincidences and things that don't add up. But here's another thing. So he appears in Washington, D.C., they speak about it later, he has no idea where he's been, the last thing he remembers is getting into the plane. So he appears in this futuristic world 70 years after his death, and then he just walks to the other side of a population of 3 million people and happens to find Diana. Okay, cool. I guess that's a thing then, isn't it? So he finds Diana in the middle of Washington, D.C., within a day, and remember how hard it was for Batman to track her? No problem, Steve's got this on lock. All the chemistry between Gal Gadot and Chris Pine almost seems lost as well. There's a few like sweet moments here and there when they're out looking at the new technology, like the subway and the escalators and stuff like that. But I suppose the other aspect of that is that if Chris Pine walked across the city to find her, you have to assume he did so seeing some of this technology before. Seeing the cars, seeing the planes, seeing trains, seeing escalators. Like, how else did he find her? Did he just... Does he have, like, teleportation spells here? Or, like, what's going on? It felt like the chemistry wasn't there. And I think the main issue is because it felt crowbarred. It's like one of the things that worked so well in the first movie between the two of them is Chris Pine had some uses. Like, it was kind of the roles being reversed. He knew what it was like to live in this civilization. They went across to spend time in the UK, and they went across to spend time in World War One sort of culture. And so he was teaching her what to do. And it was her being this badass sort of Amazonian warrior almost that was having to acclimate to this more prudish way of living back then, which is more male dominated. And this juxtaposition was really interesting because you got to see how she adapted to it, and it was kind of funny, and they played it off as humor. And then she was, you know, at any point, you know that she could have just bust out the fucking cuffs and just absolutely wrecked everybody, but she was trying her best to stay under the radar and to get along with people. Chris Pine just appears here and he doesn't offer anything. He doesn't have any discernible skills or talents. He can't really help. He's like this third wheel that just seems to get in the way more than anything else. He actually becomes an irritation and a nuisance at some point. It feels wasted, and there's like the chemistry that's there just feels like it's gone. Like, you have to keep in mind that she's been without him for like 70 years, 60 or 70 years, and it's like they pick up like they never left off. That just doesn't seem realistic to me, you know? I feel like there would be growing pains, they'd be getting to know each other again. Or for Chris Pine, it would be like, you know, yesterday he was with her, but for her it was like it was decades ago and she has to learn a few more things. Like, it just seems like it just clicked into place so easily, and it just doesn't seem realistic at all, and it really took me out of the whole situation. This is another way which the movie, I think, wasted so much potential that it could have had. Now we're getting into like the truly daft shit that completely took me out of the film. The one skill Chris Pine has is his flying abilities. She calls it his gift. Apparently Chris Pine, Steve, can fly a jet fighter from the 1980s because he was a pilot in World War One. and it takes him like 5 seconds to acclimate to it. He just knows everything. Onboard computer, no problems. Jet plane, no problems at all. Never mind the fact they are drastically different planes and they drastically work in different ways. He's not using fucking jet fighters in World War One, is he? He's using biplanes. And so, like, the fact that he just gets in there, he knocks a couple of fucking knobs around, and then suddenly they're airborne is just so ludicrous to me. Like, it just didn't make any sense at all. They could have at least picked like an old school plane that made more sense, or maybe like a World War II plane, or at least like an early 50s plane or something that had more similarities between the two of them. But you're just gonna go from World War One plane to jet fighter in the 1980s, and he's just gonna get in there and have no issue at all about learning how to fly that. Like, please fuck off. Then there's the whole issue of the radar, and now you find out about the invisible jet that everybody wanted to see, right? That's the one thing people missed from the OG Wonder Woman. Now Diana, out of nowhere, even saying, "Yep, last time I did it, it was like a cup or something, and it disappeared." But now she can make the whole jet radar proof by making it invisible. What? Excuse me? Like, just out of nowhere? You just make it invisible. Alright, cool. Diana's also apparently now able to fly. She learns that in the space of 3 seconds. Remember all those flying scenes from the Justice League, which was 30 years after this? Actually, like more like 35 years after this movie took place. Remember when she was flying around and it was life or death, and she probably should have bust out that really handy special power, and she didn't? Well, turns out that she can fly in this film, but for some reason she decided not to in future ones. Excellent. Awesome. Makes perfect sense. And she learned it pretty much instantly. Remember the whole thing about needing to earn what you achieve and all the success you get? Well, it turns out she didn't need to earn any of that. At least in Superman, you know, the Superman with Henry Cavill, or some of the other ones that have been made, it shows him trying to learn to fly and like actually how difficult it is. And whether you like those movies or not, it typically does a pretty good job of him, like, it's not easy. It takes time. Even with like the General Zod thing, this is a guy that was bred to be adaptive, bred to be excellent at honing his senses. He even struggled a little bit with it. So I don't know. It just took me out of the film completely. Also, there's other aspects of this that don't even make sense in the sort of grand scheme of things. It becomes evident that every time Maxwell grants someone their wish, he gets injured. You never explain why this is the case. I know it takes something away from you, but it seems it takes his sanity away and makes him a lot more of an asshole and more egotistical and power-driven. But like, he gets bloodshot eyes, his nose bleeds, his ears bleed, and then later on he can just do it without any issues. He also typically needs to touch people, has to hold their hand or like be in contact with them and make them wish it, right? Yet they have to say, "I wish," and then it'll come true. Yet later on in the film, with the whole particle shit, which I'll get into in a moment, which is absurdly stupid, they can just say it or say what they want or think it, and it all just comes to fruition. Consistency be damned, right? Like, who needs consistency? And the way that the final act comes into play is this idea that, I'm going to try and explain this to the best of my ability, but the movie doesn't do a very good job, so why the fuck should I make any effort? He finds out that there's ability with some technology which uses the same technology as the Star Wars program. You can beam particles to every TV in the world, and you can just take over their programs and make your broadcast go through them. How does it work? Dunno, doesn't tell you. There's also another issue about this, because it's showing his broadcast being televised around the world to places like China, in the Middle East. Are we just assuming that everyone on the planet can speak English? Because pretty sure the vast majority of people on the planet don't speak English as their primary language, at least. So why is it showing China, the Middle East, and all these other places, and the idea is that almost everybody is wishing right now, when most people, especially in the 1980s, would not have spoke English very well or at all? It's so stupid. even the particle idea is so stupid. But then it's also the idea that he doesn't need to touch them anymore. Now he can just speak to them, and somehow it works that he's like intertwined and connected, and he can hear the wishes being made. What the fuck is this consistency? Then the end is super, super cringeworthy. Gal Gadot's trying her best, but she just can't. She can't convey this speech because the speech is just garbage itself. I don't think many people on the planet could have done a better job than this. She basically begs everybody through the truth of lasso onto Maxwell to revert their wishes, and that's the only way the world will be saved. And through this like speech, she makes every single person on the planet revert their wish. Every single motherfucking person. Not one sociopath, not one psychopath that only gives a fuck about themselves and doesn't care about anybody. Not one person that has wished that their terminally ill child or one of their dead relatives or partners comes back to life. Not one of those people that has wished for something that they can't really live without decides to say, fuck it, I'm not going to revert my wish. Not one person. Every single fucking person reverts their wish. Fuck you. That is so ridiculous. That is so ridiculous. Millions, if not billions of wishes all get reverted because Diana has a heart-to-heart with them. Get out my face. It's so shit. The final end fight scene. Appalling. Abysmal. Diana and Barbara kick it off, and it's like, this is Kristen Wiig's persona. When I first saw this, I buckled laughing, and I don't think that was the intention of the movie, right? I think the intention of the movie was like, oh shit, she's some apex predator, she's a badass. I just creased laughing. It was like a furry suit, like literally Kristen Wiig in a furry suit, and little did I know, that was the best part of this fight scene. Because at least that made me laugh. The rest of the fight scene was shit. They built up this idea that this warrior in the past wore this like badass armor and she stood against all of mankind. All of them. And it showed all these big buff dudes with big ass swords encircling her and pounding down with their swords. And she was just stood there alone against the world. But this furry can break the armor in like 3 seconds. And even the fight itself is basically amounts to a slapping contest. There's nothing cool happening here. There's a moment where they lasso like Tarzan or some shit, and they're flying around with the lasso of truth, and they're flying around the electric cables, and that's it. And they do some like weird thing where they're fighting in midair while on these wires, and it just looks really strange. And then they fall into the water, and Diana gives her one last chance. And she's like, renounce your wish, renounce your wish. And she says, never. And then Diana apologizes. I'm saying, I'm so sorry for this. I'm thinking, right, well, obviously Barbara's going to die, right? She gets electrocuted. Doesn't affect Diana, who in various degrees has been battered by Barbara, but Barbara is susceptible to being hurt by this electricity because don't really know. She did say that her wish was to be like Diana, so you'd have to assume that comes with all of her immortality and invulnerabilities to the elements and everything else. So if Diana's not affected by this, then why is she? Don't know. Isn't explained. You just have to believe it, guys. Electricity wrecks this apex predator, as she calls herself. She doesn't die, though, of course. Diana instantly saves her, and then she just lives. No problems. Absolute garbage. Also, the end between Maxwell and Diana. Diana is being pushed back by what equates to a bit of wind. Like 20-30 mile an hour winds maybe is pushing her back. This is the same person that literally absorbed headbutts in a one-on-one fight with Superman, who was knocking her all over the place and she was okay, but a bit of fucking wind and she can't move through it. Yep. Why? Don't know that either. Doesn't explain it. It's wind. Apparently wind's really powerful. That is Diana's weakness. Just fart in her direction and you'll knock her back. Everyone lives happily ever after, guys. Maxwell has no repercussions. Barbara has no repercussions. The president of the United States, who when asked what his wish was, more nukes, could have wished for world peace, could have wished that all the Russians' nukes disappeared, could have wished for one of a million things that would have been much better, but the script is so shit that they had to somehow build into this Cold War narrative, because what would the 80s be without Cold War? So it was just so fucking trash. No repercussions for being a massive dickhead and nearly ending the world. Barbara is fine. Shite. And here's the last part I'm going to say, because this has been 30 minutes and I'd never want to speak or think about this movie ever again. You're telling me that in the wake of a very close world-ending moment where Armageddon was literally there, missiles had been fired from these capital cities. You saw it in Moscow, you saw it in Washington, D.C. Literally missiles, nukes were being fired into the air. You saw children looking at it, people looking at it. They all witnessed this. Not a single person remembers when the world nearly ends to nuclear apocalypse. This is never mentioned in the Justice League. This is never mentioned in any of the future fucking films in this universe. When the world nearly fucking ended. Everyone forgets about this landmark moment. Think about it this way, right? We still remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. No nukes were fired at all, thank God. Nothing like that even remotely happened. It was a very tense time. That was from the 1950s, 1940s, some of the other things that we remember, right? But this near apocalypse, with missiles actually being fired at each other, just not remembered. Nothing. And you can't even say it was covered up by the military or downplayed by the military because, again, millions of people would have witnessed nuclear warheads flying into the fucking atmosphere. Like, they would have seen this happen. You literally see nukes being fired. You literally see it with your own eyes. And so do all these civilians. For fuck's sake, this film is just absolutely top to bottom fucking butt cheeks. It's so shit. And please, if you've made it through to the end of this video, do not waste a single minute of your life watching this film. I am so disappointed at how bad this movie came out, considering that I did actually enjoy the first Wonder Woman. I think they've already penciled in a third film. It better be notably better than this movie, because honestly, this film is absolute dog shit. I'll see you in the next video, guys. I'm off to go chill. I need to decompress after that. Peace.